All right, you good?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode. He's a little late, but it's okay. We still appreciate him. I got my guy here today. I am so excited to chop it up with him. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Fredrick Joseph, best-selling and award-winning author, and attempting my best to just be a change maker in this world.
I appreciate you, and that is a very small snippet of what you are into and what you are doing for the world. Frederick, tell me a little bit about just like I have known about you for so long. I've read basically everything that you've written, and I always ask this question because I think it's really important. Like, tell me about little Frederick. Like, what did that look like for you growing up?
Yeah, I was a kid who was little Frederick. I was really in my own little bubble, kind of. To be honest, afraid of the world a little bit, right? I was a kid who got teased a lot. I was a kid who, grew up without my father being around. I was a kid who grew up in poverty. And so I think that I created this little world for myself. We didn't have the money to do certain things. My mother did the best that she could. And so I remember I would get like action figures, stuff like that, and build like storylines, right? I
Hmm.
would like have little whole like narrative arcs for each character, right? And sometimes if we couldn't afford a new action figure, I would like take the arms off of one, put the arms on another. Oh, this one just got a power up, you know what I mean? And things like that. So I was one of those kids who was just creatively surviving in my own little world.
Hmm. And would you say, how did the writing and the creativity happen? Was that something that was brought up like in your childhood, in the household? Was it at school?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I liken myself as a writer to somewhat of a jazz musician.
mhm.
I grew up around the culture, really, right? Like I grew up in New York. On Sundays we were listening to Anita Baker, the Stylistics, listening to Marvin, and all around my house and in my grandmother's house as well. There were books everywhere, right? From
Mhm.
Toni Morrison to Richard Wright to Du Bois, everything. There was just books everywhere. And this was a time when there wasn't as much TV and we didn't have cable, right? So I was in the house reading. I was reading and my grandmother really impressed upon me the importance of writing.
Mhm.
And I think that everyone who writes is a writer, but I think that she was able to combine my interest in kind of creative storytelling and narrative arcs with writing, and that's kind of what sparked it.
I love that. I have so many questions. So you speak about the culture, and it would be rude of me not to ask. And we talked about this a little bit. And I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but we gotta talk about it. We gotta talk about it. Speaking of the culture, and I'm from Canada, but I'm not from Toronto. I already talked to you about that. What are your I have so many questions around it, but what are your thoughts around hip hop right now and what these two individuals um are doing in regards to, battling it out for what a lot of people are saying is, the head of the snake, right?
Yeah,
Let
yeah.
me I want to know your thoughts. I want to know what you're thinking. I know yesterday there's three of them. Three of them came out yesterday. So I know there's a lot to digest as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's so funny. I'm a big basketball head, and my Lakers got eliminated. So, like last night, I was watching the Clippers and the Mavs game, hoping that the Clippers got eliminated, and I fell asleep in the middle of the game. I woke up to like 40 text messages, and I'm thinking, oh, something must have happened in the game that was wild. I saw the Clippers eliminated, but I'm like, oh, that couldn't have been it. All I see is, where are you? Where are you right now? How come you be calling you? We texting, what's going on? And they're like, Kendrick, Drake. I'm like, all right, all right, all right. And so for me, it's interesting. Let me first say, this feels like, for somebody my age, right? Like, this feels like being in the 90s all over. The Knicks are a good team in basketball.
Hmm.
X-Men 97 is out. Hip hop is relevant, But, I think that I'm really I don't know, because I have to look at everything through a lens of kind of like social criticism or whatever. And I think Kendrick is the better writer, the better rapper, the better artist. I don't think that there's even really a comparison. I think that Drake, allows us to have fun, so on and so forth. I don't think that their artistry is anywhere in the same level.
Hmm.
But I think that they're both hypocrites, right? Like in reality, they're both hypocrites because on the one end, I guess you had Drake saying, "Oh, Kendrick, you beat your wife, which is horrible." And then on the other end, you had Kendrick saying, "Oh, you're not for the culture, and you are hiding children, and you're on weight loss drugs, and all these different things." And they both are essentially calling each other like misogynoirists, right?
Hmm.
In different ways. And I'm like, well, you're both also just like that is who you both are, right? Like you
Hmm.
can't criticize Drake, but then have Kodak Black on your album if you're
That's
Kendrick,
the first thing I was thinking. That's the
right?
first
Like
thing I was thinking.
on his last album, he had a man. If I'm not mistaken, I could have sworn that like Kodak did something like locked a woman in like a room for like
Yeah.
3 days and beat her. Or something. It was so you have him on your album, and you also talking about I'm not black. I'm black is just a color, whatever, right?
Hmm.
And then on the
Hmm.
other end, you have Drake talking about you rap like you trying to free the slaves. Like what's happening? What's what's what are either of you talking about? All I know is that somewhere Nas and Jay Z are looking at them like, oh, these young boys. You know what I mean? But what are your thoughts, man? What are your thoughts?
No, I was thinking the same thing. It's hard. I mean, similar. Growing up, it was Nas, it was Jay Z, and it's felt different then. I think now, I think it's a lot of you know they're looking for a lot of it is like I'm looking for the gossip, I'm looking for the stories, and I'm going to implement
Hmm.
the stories however I feel fit. On one end, I think that there's a lot of reaching that's happening. Like we're reaching for a lot of different angles that how are we as audience members going to know what is true and what's not true, right?
Right.
So we can only base it on the facts that we see. Like you talked about Kodak, we have seen Drake over and over and over again, the way he talks about women, specifically black women. Like
Right.
there's so many things that I think there's so many layers to it, but I I, I don't think it's over. I don't think it's gonna get any better or any worse. I feel like at this point it's just gonna continue until one of them are like, you know what, I'm just gonna step aside and continue on. Like it it I don't think it's going to get to a point where we are saying Drake is a better rapper than Kendrick. Like
Right.
we already know that. We already
Right.
know the answer to that. So it's
Right.
interesting though.
Yeah. I would hope that, and maybe this is just the mature, older me, a younger me, be like, yeah, y'all need to just keep going, whatever. I don't care. It's
Uh
entertainment.
huh.
But I think me at this age, I look for some of the older rappers and people in the culture to step in soon and just kind of say like, y'all need to actually end this because whether that's Jay Z or Nas or whomever,
Hmm.
um, because I do think that we're getting to the point where it's not really about rap. Like when you start talking about, you have a daughter that you don't take care of, and or this, all these different like, oh, this person slept with your wife or whatever. You're getting into a territory where I don't want this to end in violence,
Hmm.
right? Like whether that's violence to one of them or to people around them. And so I just think it needs to end soon because it's going to become something that's not entertainment. It's already becoming toxic.
Yeah. No, I agree. And then strays are going to be thrown. More people are going to be brought in, and it's just going to be a repeated cycle over and over again. I agree.
Right.
I totally agree with you. Are there people within like hip hop culture, and I'm assuming there are, that have influenced you in your writing?
Woof. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I grew up. So I oftentimes say I write, depending upon what I'm writing, I write like a rapper,
You
depending
do.
upon what I'm writing, right? Like I think if I'm writing for actually it doesn't matter who I'm writing for. I write pretty directly. I get to the point. I say what needs to be said, and I'm not really afraid. And that's just kind of growing up in New York. From I grew up on like I said, Hove. I grew up on. I'm from Yonkers, right? Like so. But for those who obviously weren't on before, my publicist for some reason had identified that you were from Yonkers. You were
I'll
not.
take it. I'll take it.
but I am from Yonkers, so I grew up on DMX. I grew up on Jadakiss. I grew up on the Locks, and it means something to us. I think we have a chip on our shoulder because Yonkers is not in New York City, but we have greats that come from where we're from. So there's this
Mhm,
lineage, right? So I'm always like, oh, I gotta show up like I'm part of the Rough Riders whenever I show up on the page, right? Like if I'm gonna say it, I'm gonna say it with my chest, and because I gotta prove a point to the people who are from the Bronx, who are from Brooklyn, so on and so forth.
mhm,
I would say a lot of my writing is influenced by, yeah, like I said, Jadakiss, DMX. I think there's a lot of Mary J. Blige in my writing, who also is from Yonkers.
mhm,
Shout outs to Mary. Yeah, there's a lot of hip hop in my writing.
mhm. And then I guess my other question, the other like, there's so many layers to like, what was your influence to get into just like social activism, social justice, racial equity? Like, where does that side come from?
Yeah, you know something funny? Like. I think because everybody throws around the idea of what an activist is. I never
Uh huh.
actually consider myself an activist or anything along those lines. My grandmother just taught me like if you have the hands to do the work, then do good work, right? And so
Mm,
I'm just like I have the hands, and the hands, obviously metaphorically, I have a platform. I have readers, I have followers, I have a robust email list. So if I'm gonna have an email list, like right now, I'm writing something about Hakeem Jeffries and Eric Adams, all these different black men who are New York politicians, and how damaging they are for black liberation. Um, Not because I have to, but because I want to, because we need to, right? And that's just what I was
mhm,
brought up in. So I don't know if that answers the question necessarily, but it's just because it doesn't feel like there was like a thing per se. It's just like
mhm,
black American. How this is my lineage, this is my heritage.
mhm. No, I love that. What's the quote from Grandma again? If you have the hands
Yeah,
to do
if you have the hands to do the work, do
to
good
do
work.
good work. I love that. I love that. I love that. And I think it's so important, like when people are giving you a name, it's not something you necessarily have to take on as well.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
what specifically for you, I think one of my questions is like, with so much happening in the world and so much that you take on in regards to sharing your voice, expressing your opinion about things, sharing knowledge. Like, where do you find time to, just be, to find joy, to, turn off? Do you turn off? Um,
Mm, that's a good question. So I like to work out. I've been working out for since I was like maybe like 14. I grew up playing sports, so on and so forth.
mhm,
But I don't think that I necessarily do turn off, right? I think that's just the reality of it, and I'm navigating that now. Like, what does it look
mhm,
like to to turn off, right? I don't think
mhm,
that many people, what did James Baldwin say? To be, conscious is to constantly be in a state of rage. I'm
mhm,
butchering that a little bit, but it's the general essence of the quote. Um, I'm constantly enraged, right? And I think that even when I try to chill, just being really honest, um,
mhm,
you then have moments like like what's happening in Gaza. Um,
mhm,
so the sad truth is, not all of us are going to put in the pain and do the work.
mhm,
So I constantly feel like those of us willing to do the work. I'm not trying to be a martyr by any stretch of the imagination, but that's the work, right?
mhm,
Like I don't think that as the forces of evil as they were constantly are pushing, there's not really a chance to sleep per se. And I know that a lot of people preach, rest, and even Rest is Resistance was a huge book, last year, so
mhm,
on and so forth. I just don't find the time necessarily, and that's not a good thing, but it's just the honest truth.
mhm. No, I appreciate that. I guess my follow-up question is that how do you handle the, for lack of a better word, comes with it in regards to, criticism, um, the outside voices, the noise, etc. You just block it out. Like, what happens when that stuff happens around you?
I mean, I think you sadly sort of get used to it, right? Like, unlike, I think there's a lot of people, especially in our day and age, who wanted to be public figures, who wanted
Mm,
to be, whatever, have the hundreds of thousands of followers and stuff like that. I never wanted those things. I never looked for those things. I never asked for those things, right?
Mhm.
If something has gone viral, it's not because it was plotted out to go viral. It just happenstance over time. And so I think because of that in the beginning, it was really hard because I'm like, I'm just a civilian out here. What the hell? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you would have a moment where like I'll say something historically like, oh, I don't know, like whatever about race, and then all of a sudden your tweet or your video is on Fox News. I'm like, yo, I didn't
Mhm.
ask for none of this. You know what I mean? And I don't have an apparatus built around me for this. But
Mhm.
I think over the last 3 years, especially, is when I've been like, you know what? This isn't even the real world, right? The real world is this conversation with you, right? The real
Mhm.
world is the culture. The real world is where you find solace and hope and peace if you can find those things. And that's the real world that you build up from, right? That's the ground level for me. And I build up from there. I don't even see some of the things that are said about me because that's not the real
Mhm.
world.
Mhm. Mhm. And thinking about Black Friend and how much you talk about liberation and your
Mhm.
idea of liberation. So, uh, what is your thoughts on where we need to go for liberation in regards to the state of the world right now? Like, what does that look like for you?
I think the root of it would be intersectionality, right? Like,
Mm.
and I think the sad stop. And I think the sad, and I think the sad truth is a lot of people are not invested in liberation outside of themselves, right?
Mm.
And that's sadly, people from communities I belong to included, right? Like whether that be men or whether that be black people at times, so on and so forth. And so for me, the goal is for people to be more intersectional. Is I think when you look at a moment like Gaza, right? You
Mhm.
just had the other day, again to the point of like Hakeem Jeffries and Eric Adams. And for those who don't know who they are, Hakeem Jeffries is a congressman from New York City. Eric Adams is the mayor of New York City, both black men. And, despite what happened with the NYPD at Columbia University, for those who are not familiar with that, the NYPD came in and completely assaulted peaceful protesters at Columbia University, students who attend that school for no reason, right? Uh, and Hakeem Jeffries was just like, "Oh, I didn't see any excessive force being used." And the person who sent them in was Eric Adams. And these are two black men, knowing the ways in which state sanctioned violence has impacted black and brown bodies, and they still did these things. And so when I look at liberation and focus on people like that, somehow we need to bring those people either along or just
Mhm.
or demolish those people.
Get rid of them.
I mean, like, for real.
Yeah, and it's so funny. I was reading something online the other day and talk about how much we want kids, and I mean they're not even kids, young adults to, be involved or share how they feel. And here they are. Like here they are. Here are these kids on these campuses genuinely, you know, out in front lines trying to do what it is to make sure people are being heard, and they are being treated like animals.
Right.
They're being treated like animals, right? So
Right.
how do you tell a group of kids, yeah, you have freedom of speech, you should do what you need to do the right thing, and then all of a sudden, you have the dogs and the hoses on you,
Right.
right? Like it just doesn't make sense.
Right. I mean, I'm not going to say, because I don't know if you're public about this, like what country you're in right now, but you're in another country,
Hmm.
and if you look at the ways in which that country has historically been treated by the United States, you
Yep.
got to realize that sure, like, if you live in this country, you dealing with a villain. You are living at the head of the snake, right?
Hmm.
The United States is is a demon. I don't know another way of putting that. Right? It is a colonial settler nation built on propagating and perpetrating violence globally. And I would
Hmm.
say, shit, at this point, intergalactically, probably for all we know.
Hmm.
And so, with that being said, I have to constantly remember that so many people who are marginalized were still brought up in that culture, right? That
Hmm.
culture of dominance, that culture of demolition. And so I have to remind myself I can't bring everybody along, right? Time is ticking, for example, to save people in Gaza. So I don't have time to take 2 years to bring a Hakeem Jeffries along to get him the baseline understand. I just need
Hmm.
to get you out of the way because I'm trying to save lives.
Yeah. Get out of the way. Help out or get out of the way. And it's so
Right.
interesting because we mentioned before we hopped on, like I had lived in Manila, which is in the Philippines, and you see the impact there. And then now I'm in Vietnam, and you see the impact here still to this day of how much the American war has placed on them. Like we're in Hanoi, where there's families and the structure of Hanoi in itself. You can see that it's been damaged based on
Right.
the past, which has been, something they've been dealing with for a very, very long time. So yeah, I like that you called it a demon because that's exactly
Yeah,
what it is.
it truly is. You talking about this is a nation founded by degenerates who were sent away from their original country. Like this is a nation of pirate degenerates. You know what I mean? this, this is this is the reality of what the United States is, and so I think that I tell everyone to watch "Exterminate All the Brutes" by Raoul Peck. I believe that's
Hmm.
still on HBO Max. It's one of the most brilliant documentaries ever. It's a mini series just about the history of colonialism in the United States and a few other places, and just how brutal it was, and yet how gaslighted we are to actually call natives brutes, to call Black Americans brutes, to call all these other people brutes. And you
Hmm.
were taking pikes and sticking them through the anuses and through the mouths of native peoples and roasting them in front of their children. And that is the lineage from which that our politicians descend.
Wow. Wow. I'm trying to I'm trying to understand what it is that they don't understand. Like why aren't they moving? Like why aren't they doing the things that may, maybe intellectually they don't know. Maybe they don't know.
I mean, I think capitalism is be real with you, it's I say this all the time, right? So I've had a pretty solid career out the gate as an author, but I tell
Hmm.
people constantly, had I made different decisions, wrote about different things, I would be. Do you know who Colleen Hoover is?
Yeah.
I would be
Hmm.
Colleen Hoover at this point. I'd be
Yeah.
the Black Colleen Hoover, right? Because I
Yeah.
love me a good rom com. I love me a good this and that and third, right? If I wrote a story about a young scrapping black teen dating one of the Gilmore girls or something like that. If I wrote me a little Dawson's Creek, One Tree Hill, I could do that, right? And I would
That's true.
sell 10 million books. But that's not my calling. But
Hmm.
people, even when it's not their calling, will still answer the call because the money's there.
That's so true. And it's so funny because I had the same conversation with my editor
Mm,
a while ago, just talking about people like us. And I'm very early in this writing thing, but I've talked to a lot of black writers, and the amount of writers that write about their trauma is like all of us, everybody
mhm, yep.
is writing about their trauma and writing from a place of vulnerability. And that can be so exhausting. It can be
Yeah.
so exhausting.
Yeah,
Um,
man.
but at the same time, that's where you get your liberation from. That's where you get your release from. Like you can put all of what you want to say on the page, right? And it lives for forever once it's out there. So I think it's hard, but I think it's definitely worth it. And I definitely think that over time, that's what longevity looks like, right? Like what you do on the page is going to be there forever. So I appreciate you. I really do. I appreciate you for doing that.
That means a lot. I mean, it's so funny because so stop it. So sorry, my dog. He knows when I'm doing like a podcast or a conversation. So
Wants attention.
he'll beg for treats because he knows he can do it at this time. He I don't know, he's different, but to the point. it's funny because my next book coming out is my poetry collection, and then I have a YA. My first novel, my YA novel, comes out next May.
Mm.
Um, and ironically, my second YA novel, which we're going out with on proposal next month, part of it centers actually a Vietnamese girl, so that's just ironic. But
Ah, no way.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, we'll definitely have to get you that. But anyway, the point I was about to make was, but it's so interesting. 'Cause the other day I was doing the audiobook for my poetry collection, and my engineer in the room and all the people like from Spotify on the thing, like listening in, like the directors or whatever, they're all these white men, and in it, I'm like black liberation, black dick. You see me as a black, you you see me as a, you see like, just like I'm just this is my truth, right? Like I'm writing about white women fetishizing. I'm like, oh, you when I walk by, you have mandingo dreams. You know what I mean? And and it's so funny because like I'm like, damn, I really wish in this moment that I would have wrote about like daffodils and dandelions.
What is their reaction? Are they reacting at all? Like what are you looking at them?
Yo, yo, so it's funny. Like at some point, I needed a water break, and so one of the engineers was like, I just want to take a second. It's these three white guys, and one of them was like, Fredrick, I just want to take a second and say thank you. Thank you for your truth. You know how white people are. Like he like just wants to say thank you for your truth, and thank you for giving us things that we don't deserve.
Oh my
It's so funny because I think the poem that I just finished before that, I'm like, I'm a direct writer, so I'm like these crackers can't break me, you know.
God.
So it's just hilarious to be like, we like you said, it's cathartic though, right? Like I think people don't realize. I think people sometimes like, oh, why do y'all talk about this? Why do y'all talk about that? I'm like, yo, some of this shit just be cathartic. When you could put on the page that like white women see you as a mandingo, that's cathartic as shit. You know what I mean? Where else can I say that? I can say that maybe to like you have the same conversation on NPR, but like, yeah, white women see me as a mandingo. Thanks for like CNN,
That's amazing. I'm trying to I'm trying to picture these men. Oh my god. Because they do that's what they said. It's like, thank you so much. Thank you for being so vulnerable. We really appreciate you. Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. That's amazing. Uh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. My
Oh, there
dog
you
is
go.
barking. I'm
There you go.
trying
There
to.
you go. Oh, so take your time. Take your time. Take your time. Frederick, tell me about your feelings about the Knicks right now.
So something funny? While I am from New York, I actually can't stand the Knicks.
You
I'm a
know, because
huge.
I
Go
know
ahead.
I saw you post the other day the Lakers logo. You changed it to the
The
Wolves.
Timberwolves joint, yeah. So I am a massive Lakers fan. So everything else is New York. I'm a Mets fan. I don't really watch hockey a lot, but I'm a Rangers fan. I'm Liberty fan. Go Liberty. But I'm a Lakers fan because my first time ever seeing somebody hoop on a high level was Kobe Bryant when he was in high school. And
Mhm.
so I just kind of like followed him from there and became a Lakers fan, whatever. But man, I hate the Knicks because I feel like the Knicks are
Why are you
every
so mad? Why are you so mad at them though?
because they are defined by like everything that people have as stereotypes about New Yorkers, right? Like they're just delusional, man. The Knicks are delusional. Like every time the Knicks get anybody, like, oh, we going to the championship. You haven't won a championship in 40 years, B. Anyway, why'd you ask me this?
I'm just curious. You're in New York, right? You're from New York, so I just assumed that you had little love for
Nah,
New York.
not at all. Because and another thing is, I because I'm not a Knicks fan, but I live in I'm a New Yorker. I'm a New Yorker, right? And because I'm not a Knicks fan and my friends are all New Yorkers, it's the one thing that I have to deal with a New York personality going against me with, right? And I'm like, yo, are we this
Mm.
obnoxious? I'm like, yo, like they be like, nah, dead ass. It's New York, B. It's New York. We up, we up. I'm like, yo, do I sound like this? So, but, I was
But
gonna ask you, wait, so are you a Raptors fan?
by default,
You're really trying to throw away all of Toronto now. This is nasty work.
by default, you know what? By default I am a Raptors fan. Um, but I love Shea. So I love OKC just because of what Shea does. I've watched him since he was in Kentucky and on the Canada team when he was really young. So I'm an OKC fan, Raptors fan by default. But I just love good basketball. I grew up playing basketball as well. I played basketball in university,
Oh, word?
and yeah, so a small college, but like I love good basketball. I really do.
Hmm.
So, um, I asked about the Knicks because, and
Right.
I hate bringing up the Knicks. I know you don't like them, but I'm gonna bring them up again.
Uh huh.
Looking at what they're doing right now without Julius Randle, do they need Julius Randle? I guess that's the question.
Ooh, damn! And you and I got to do probably a whole episode at some point about hoop because damn. And so here, I'm gonna say this. Another reason I don't like the Knicks is because of how they treated Julius Randle after that playoff series. When they were tearing down his like
Uh,
posters and stuff, because
I
the
get
Lakers
that.
drafted him. I have that. I have a soft place in my heart for him. I don't want him on my team, but I gotta find my heart for him. But they don't need him. They don't need him. I think that they need another scorer, right? I would be interested to see them probably get Devin Booker or KD or something like that. Um,
Hmm.
but no, I think Julius is undersized. I think that what they've gotten with Mitchell Robinson and Hartenstein, to me, what is Julius Randle going to provide except for like ball stoppage? And Jalen Brunson looked like he looked like I don't, I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't know either. He's something out of a mystical storybook right now.
Yeah,
Like,
he looked like you ever see Lord of the Rings? Um, he looked like the homie with the axe, Gimli. He looked like Gimli, but he be having a rock on a string though. He looked like a little
he's tough.
whatever them drakes is called.
He's
They're
so
not a
tough.
yeah,
Oh, he's so tough.
big
He's
old
so
head.
tough. He's
Like
so tough. He's so tough. But and I guess my last ball question is: did your boy deserve to get fired?
Darvin.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. 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 I have never in my life seen so and you watch ball, you know ball, so we can talk real ball, right? You How do you watch a 20-2 run and don't call a timeout? Like part of the game is playing chess with timeouts, playing chess with lineups, so on and
Hmm.
so forth. I've never seen that man do anything particularly interesting or make a move that was like, oh, like for example, when if your team is not scoring, like that game when the Lakers are up by 20, the
Hmm.
second to me that you lose, there was like actually about like 24 at one point. The second that it goes down to like a 15-point lead, you call a timeout. If y'all not scoring, I'm switching up whatever. I'm like, whoever's not shooting well, whoever's not,
You
we
have
mixing
to.
this up.
You have
Yeah,
to. You have to. And I think the other
yeah.
part is like he also. I mean, LeBron is who he is, but like I think Austin wasn't in the starting lineup for like half of the year. Like
And neither
they
was
kept bringing him off,
Zero.
and they were bringing him off the bench, and it's
Uh huh.
like, what are you like? What are you trying to do? You already are at like undermanned. Like you don't have. I think it was a couple guys that were injured, and all of a
Yep.
sudden you like are bringing these dudes off the bench, but you need buckets.
Yeah.
Where are the buckets coming from?
I mean,
Right?
and there's not a lot, but there's like, for instance, I would have tried to play Max Christie a bit more if they were not scoring, right? Like
Hmm.
Max Christie has more of a spot up shooter ability than like Austin Reeves at times. So if he's not scoring, and do what you gotta do. But I don't know. Darvin Ham was trash. Also, not that you asked, but the LeBron era got to end. Send LeBron packing. If we could do a sign and trade, I'm over LeBron. And I know that sounds bananas to people, but if you really, he's a ball stopper, and I don't think that any of these players are going to get better playing with him at this point. And I don't think that at
Mhm.
40 years old, he's still phenomenal, but I don't think he is who he thinks he is, and it doesn't benefit the team when he thinks he's still that.
No, I agree. And I saw another. I think it was a tweet or someone posted on Instagram the other day. Just like we need to acknowledge him for what he is. He's phenomenal at what he's done for the league. But yes, like you're not going to grow with him on your team. Like
Right.
it's going to be very very difficult. So I agree. I totally agree. Get what you can now because he only has maybe 2 years left
Yeah.
of scoring 20,
Yeah. I mean,
right?
realistically, he and people would blame AD for a lot. AD had a phenomenal playoffs this year,
He did.
and in two of the games, he only touched the ball once in the fourth quarter. A lot of that is LeBron's fault. Why are you
Mhm.
top of the key running ISO plays with 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and AD's the one who's been cooking? Give him the ball.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
anyway, you shouldn't. We shouldn't have talked. We shouldn't have talked no basketball.
For what is the I had a question about sports here. So the question was like how do you see the intersection of sports and culture impacting like the fight for racial equity and social justice?
Oh man, that's such a good question because I think that they are intrinsically connected, right? And primarily
Mhm.
because sports have been in many ways our front lines for connecting with the youth, right? Connecting with
Mhm.
culture, so on and so forth. Right, I think it's extremely important. Like you look at like people like Muhammad Ali, Jesse Owens, the history of how certain individuals become mythical to us, and when those mythical beings make political decisions and are open about
Mhm.
their politics, it changes the game, right? I do think that Muhammad's stance on not going to fight in Vietnam helped raise mass awareness about Vietnam, especially within communities that otherwise were not engaged. I think
Mhm.
that, even more recently, and I've been disappointed about this, I think LeBron has done a okay job at times of being, outspoken, of
Mhm.
being outspoken. Doesn't always know what he's talking about though. Um,
Mhm.
so I
He
wish that
tries.
he tries. He tries, but he doesn't always know what he's talking about. But yeah, I think it's extremely important.
Mhm.
Even if you look at women's sports, like the necessity of supporting women's sports is intrinsically tied to um, feminism in general, right? Like
Mhm.
you look at Serena Williams and the conversations around her while she was playing were also conversations about misogynoir, right? Like
Mhm.
all of it is
Mhm.
interconnected.
No, I love that, and I think it's so important. I mean, it's always been important, but even more now, seeing that like athletes have such easy access to social media, to people, and their influence can be so big. Like I look at what the Caitlin Clark in South Carolina, like what they've done, like Angel Reese, like how these kids have had such an impact already just on like the sport in itself, and now what comes along with that, like what comes along with that responsibility of having so many people look up to you. um I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I will say I do wish that a few people, not a few people, I wish the vast majority of the athletes would use their platforms a bit more, right? Because I do
Mhm,
think that where you used to have um, you have to wait for the media historically or make certain stances while,
mhm,
maybe like if you're Jesse Owens and everyone at the Olympics, throwing up the Black
mhm,
Power fist, you don't have to
mhm.
do that anymore. You can literally just go on Instagram right now and say "Free Palestine" whenever
Yep.
you want, right?
You
Like,
can.
you know,
You
I
can.
think that's I'd love to see more of that, and I hope that we get there.
Mhm.
But
You have a new book coming out. Well, yeah, you mentioned multiple books coming out, and you talked specifically about well, you talked about being in the in the tell me more about the project, why it's important to you. What are you excited about?
Yeah, so my debut poetry collection, We Alive Beloved, comes out June 11th. And it's probably the project, these next two projects are the projects I've been most excited about in my entire life, right? In my entire time as a published author. Because I think that they get to my actual literary prowess, right?
Mm,
I think that with The Black Friend, people don't realize that's a book for 13-year-olds, right?
it
Like,
is. It's a
it's a
middle.
book.
It's a middle grade.
Yeah, exactly. It's a book for
Hmm
13-year-olds. And because of the fact that we have a country that's anti-intellectual, um, I think that a lot of people, anti-intellectual, and also just like everyone's in echo chambers. So primarily adults read that. Like I get brought into company conversations, like brought in to like talk to like staffs about that book, and I'm always surprised, like, oh, I'm talking to a bunch of 70-year-olds about The Black Friend, which was for 13-year-olds. But I get it though. And then Patriarchy Blues and Better We Found, all these different books, these have been trying to essentially like mirror my sense of the world and get people activated. But for the
mm,
first time with We Alive Beloved, with This Thing of Ours, and all these coming books, is where I get to just be a writer, right? Like
mm,
obviously my social sensibility is injected into these books, but We Alive Beloved, I just have some poems in the book that are just like one poem just like about being tender, like two men being tender with each other as
mm,
black men, right?
mhm,
What does that look like? What does that mean? I have, a poem that's just about hip hop. I have a poem that's
mhm,
about capitalism, but the poem is called Cream after, cream. Cash rules everything around
mhm,
me. And I
mhm,
just use the lyrics from Cream to get into the poem, right? About capitalism. And so
mhm,
I'm really getting for the first time to be in my literary bag versus my help bring y'all along bag.
mhm, mhm. I love that. I love that. What's the official date again?
June 11th.
June 11th. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it's available for pre-order everywhere. I hope that people pre-order it. I know you've had this conversation before, but with people, but we all have. Pre-orders are important for marginalized authors.
Yes, they are. And where can people find you online?
Substack. I don't know the URL for that, but if you search my name in Substack, Fredrick Joseph, that'll come up. Instagram, TikTok. But I always tell people primarily try to find me on Substack because that's where my actual writing is. That's where I get in my like essay bag.
Mhm.
So if you're interested in reading and really like unpacking things, I kind of hate social media. So, Substack tends to be the place where I function a bit better and more thoughtfully as a writer.
I appreciate you. This was everything I needed tonight and more. We will circle back eventually to talk hoops, but I appreciate you so much. Continue doing you, man. I appreciate it.
Man, the pleasure's all mine, and I appreciate you just as a writer, as a traveler, as a black man creating platforms for us. You just I'm really proud to be in this conversation truly, and I can't say that about every conversation I'm in. I'm proud to be in this conversation, and I do once again apologize it took so long to get this done, but let's make it happen way more often. Actually.